Hello, everyone, and welcome to this 28th Urban AI Conversation. My name is Hubert. I'm the founder of Urban AI, and for this new Urban AI Conversation, I have the great pleasure of welcoming Menno Cramer. Hi, Menno.
Hi, how are you?
Great, thank you. So today we are going to talk about one of a very recent research you published on skin-to-skin architecture and
Yeah.
connect it with screenless cities, because actually this is how we met in person, like 1 year ago at the Screenless City conference. And when actually I saw your super interesting paper on skin-to-skin architecture, I thought it was first interesting, fascinating in itself, but also that we could build bridges between this
Yeah.
concept and the Screenless City work we're doing at Urban AI. So really looking forward to it. Just before, a few words about Urban AI. What is Urban AI? It's a global organization dedicated to urban artificial intelligence. We federate a think tank, leading think tank doing research experiment in the field of urban AI, including on screenless cities. We also federate a community of 200 international experts working at the intersection of AI and cities, people like Damiano Cerone, that you know very well, Menno, and many others. And we also have a consulting branch and an Urban AI Academy to help urban stakeholders in their urban AI strategy and policies. And for this 28th Urban AI conversation, we have so the great pleasure of welcoming Menno. Menno is director of user experience at OutSystems. He's also founder of BAITT, and he's the author or the co-author of a fascinating topic on skin-to-skin architecture. We will first have a presentation by Menno, like on this paper. And following the conversation, as usual, we will have an open discussion also with people attending the recording. So, the floor is all yours.
Very good. All right. Thank you. Thank you for reaching out. We met about a year ago and we stayed in touch. I think everything I always do is somewhere around user experience, design, architecture, AI. These are all lenses to the same problem as I see, because it's anything that is non-natural has been designed by a brain and is consumed by a brain, yet not many people understand the brain. I am a neuroscientist by training, work in tech, so I took a wrong turn somewhere, but somewhere around my job, if it's in UX or what I do outside, it's always about understanding how design works, how design impacts us, how we impact design. And then if it's design of, I don't know, design societies, design building, design experiences online, now designing agents, how do we as humans act and interact with agents, offline or online? It's always around that. So I'm Menno, 35, based in the Netherlands. As I said, neuroscientist and designer by training. And yeah, that's a bit about me. Not so interesting. So let's proceed. So I didn't really prepare a presentation. I think in my day-to-day job, I probably produce enough slides already. So I try to avoid doing that here. So let me share my screen, and if you can just quickly confirm if you can see it.
Yep.
Then what I wanted to talk a little bit about is what we presented, and with we, I mean Marco Casagrande and myself, earlier this year in Venice at the Venice Biennale. And we were invited to talk at the Speaker's Corner regarding the topic that they have this year. And on the work I've been doing with Marco came also the work for writing the paper. And then when we were asked to publish, and it all went quite fast, I mean, because we started at the beginning this year, then Venice was in May, then the paper was published in June or July, and now we're here in August. So it's been quite the year so far. But on these topics, I think it's really important. So we started, and this is where we met. Me and Marco have known each other since 2010 or so, which made me realize how old I am or how young I was, because 15 years ago feels a very long time ago when I was a student. But it was always around biourbanism. and how you can learn from natural um, beings, entities, and it isn't really like the biomimicry field, but it's really understanding more on the pattern language route of Christopher Alexander. And that's really about understanding how we operate and are and think and be as a biological being in a less and less biological world. Let's call it like that. Then we discussed topics like urban acupuncture, biourbanism, neuroarchitecture. It's now coming around, which is just, again, same message, different package. So I guess in the 60s from environmental psychology, we moved through the biourbanism layer now to the neuroarchitecture layer. And a lot of it is about marketing. I'll put a little bit of a pessimist note in here, and I hope someone in the audience will pick up on that and we can argue about that. I have a love-hate relationship with biophilia, pun intended, because it's misused often as making things green and healthy and alive and putting a tree in an ugly building, and then all of a sudden it's a good space. And I'm really interested in the more deeply rooted why do people act this way? What is healthy for us? What is the natural habitat for us as a human being? And how do we act and interact with the world around us? Then in 2018, I worked with Martin, Vitor, and Michiel from Ark Shelter on a project, which was a Maggie Care Center inspired cancer recovery center. So can you build a space that is calm, that's healthy, that's healing, where the patient can meet the doctor, that doesn't feel so sterile, so clinical? And that's really when I started to get into how do spaces guide us or nudge us or even hold us, and keep this bridge in mind, because I'll try to get to the point quickly. And then there's this overarching code, which I will end on, because then when we were working with Marco in the preparation for the Venice Biennale, and we went through all these projects from Landscape to La Minoranta to Treasure Hill. We also discussed Zaatari, which is also in the paper. And Zaatari is in Jordan in a refugee camp, which is about the maternity ward in that camp. And what I want to highlight here is that, first of all, these are different physical, social, architectural conditions. I think that's an important state to think about, how such a refugee camp with 80,000 people operates, almost as a living being in itself, going back to the core of what biourbanism can bring. But then also from a design point of view, and I don't know if Marco is in the call, I'm probably going to get some trouble for this, but it's not rocket science, right? It's not the most beautiful, most wonderful space designed. But the feedback we're getting really is that this is a building that holds the people, and they feel safe and they feel comfortable and they feel calm. And it's almost like a process, and it's all wooden, it's all safe. There are no men allowed, which again, in Jordan, it's a different place as it is a maternity ward. It's with this lady, Maria, who's really the godmother of all deliveries that is overseeing things. And up until now, there were no, at least to our knowledge, there were no maternal deaths. So it's even, I think we should do a post-occupancy evaluation study of this building, if how it's been designed, with taking that skin-to-skin philosophy into mind, which is the evolution of the how do buildings operate, or how do people operate in buildings, and really understand that and I have the feeling I'm becoming too philosophical here, but the design itself, it's not going to be the materials anymore. The design itself is going to be understanding how the humans operate there, and how the mothers go in, how the babies come out, the building in this case, and how that as a structure, as a biological structure, even the building can almost function as a womb, which is protected, and then you can be released safe in the world when you can get out of there again. And then we harness that in the concept of skin to skin architecture, right? And as I said, I have a medical degree. Um, and in my medical degree, I was like, well, I might as well use it for good sometimes because clearly did not become a doctor. But there are a lot of studies in neuroscience that talk about this, right? So at the beginning, I was at the Symposium for Neuroarchitecture and Neurourbanism in Lisbon earlier this year, and I spoke to Sarah Robinson, who works a lot with Juhani Palesma. And it's about senses, it's about touch, it's about understanding how we act and interact with the world around us, if this is a building, a space, or a city. But there it was about the peripersonal sphere, like the peripersonal space, what is within our reach, our physical reach, is still considered by the brain as ours because we can have control on it and we can touch it, we can feel it. I can grab things, I can interact with things. Like so, the brain is seeing this as a local entity to us. Um, and then also the studies about if you're a professional musician, or as I said, I'm a sculptor. So when I hold the chisel and the hammer in my hand, then for the brain, this is an extension of the body, right? So the brain operates with the model that our world, what we consider to be ours, doesn't end at our skin. And then applying that back to architecture, if my concept of self doesn't end at where my skin ends, then I can touch this building, and all of a sudden, this building that has a purpose. I mean, it protects me from rain and wind. And originally, architecture was shelter and it was there to protect us. And then when it didn't need to protect us anymore, we overtook aesthetics and beauty, and all of a sudden architecture had to be beautiful rather than functional. And I don't think that's the purpose of this debate, but um, then all of a sudden, what does this building mean to me? Taking into account that we have a relationship with what is directly around us. And then in skin to skin itself, there are a huge amount of health benefits, right? As in when a baby receives the skin to skin care from the mother or any caregiver, it doesn't have to be the maternal mother or even a mother. The baby's heart rate goes down, the stress response regulates, and it's about feeling safe and feeling warm. And of course, there are many other parts to it, feeling familiar. Um, and then as a baby, you don't have the concept yet of what is safety or not. So maybe there's also a piece there that novelty and familiarity should be the evaluating drivers rather than the safety, because they might not know yet what unsafe is. But that was really the core harness of the article. How can we link the building to us? And how can we understand how we act and react in different spaces? And how can we tie these two together through a patchy narrative that doesn't have anything to do with putting plants in buildings? Let's say like that. And then I think then it went quite quick. So I used AI. I translated this into a prompt for Sora and say, okay, visualize this article to me. Help me understand how I can get more assets to bring this out. And this is actually another way that I think is interesting, how we can act and interact with buildings and spaces differently. But yeah, so this is a bit about the article. This is a bit about the talk. I don't know, Hubert, do you want me? I can continue about this for hours. So I mean, I can uh, tell me where you want me to stop.
No, that's really great. Thanks a lot, Menno, actually, for the context and for sharing all those fascinating, great insights. Because I also have actually many questions when I read the paper. So more than happy to move into maybe the discussion phase. maybe one of the question would be kind of historical, actually, because in the paper you create, in a sense, a separation with the industrial age.
Yeah.
When you share that with the rise of industrial cities, we basically became
Yeah.
stranger in a sense to the touch and the feeling of the urban environment, which is super interesting. And I think in a sense true, but also in a very personal way. I think we can really feel in some cities that we are closer, and in other not that much. So I was wondering, in your opinion, like, why did this shift happen with industrial cities? What basically happened in terms of user experience and urban design?
So, so I think you first need to understand where it came from and where it's going, right? So in the three generations of cities, the first generation city is the one determined or dictated by nature, meaning humans had settlements by a river in between the valley because of protection, because of farming, because of whatever. So when we moved from nomadic tribes to being farmers, when we as a species started to settle down and started to urbanize, the rules of the city were natural, right? It was not, okay, we're gonna build it here because it needed to serve a function, often protection and food. Then eventually, I guess, in the industrial city, the question is, um, um, can you still see my screen actually or not? Do you
Yeah,
want me to keep it open or it doesn't matter?
we can we,
Um,
we can keep it, or yeah.
So yeah. So in this is why I asked, because in the second generation city, it's the industrial one. You can build, you can mass produce. All of a sudden, everyone gets space. All of a sudden, I don't know. You have these concrete things, and it's not about if concrete is beautiful or not. It's just I think the purpose of building a city changed because it wasn't necessarily about protection anymore because we started to invent countries and laws and you couldn't just shoot each other anymore. Now, I'm exaggerating how history went, but in the second generation city, the city started to serve an economic and a political purpose rather than a nature-based purpose, right? And then what Marco has been working on for years is the Ruin Academy, which is the concept of okay, what happens after the industrial city, and in the post-industrial era, you can get life back into ruins again. So it's like also, is a man-made ruin still a ruin, or is that nature? And where's the line between construction and deconstruction? If I have an abandoned warehouse and I drill holes in it so the water trickles down so trees start growing, is it then still a ruin or is it then alive? Or can something alive be a ruin, right? And again, this gets philosophical real quick. Um, but the discussions here started actually because of the work we're doing with the OM Beketov University in Kharkiv in Ukraine, because they're asking us, okay, but we need to rebuild at some point, ideally now or as soon as we can. And how are we going to rebuild this? Because the world was built with the industrial in mind. And now, okay, should I just rebuild the same? That's also why at the beginning it's like healing a city is not the same as rebuilding it, which goes back to the artificial intelligence, collective intelligence, and natural intelligence. But I think that is really where those three generation cities, and then I mean the third one we kind of still have to see, right? I think here also in the post-industrial city, where there's maybe more to the city as a construct as being an economic or a political center, we also need to design a place which AI has in there, because is so for me, and again, maybe this is a too high level discussion for here, but we should wonder if AI is the facilitator of allowing us to enter in a post-industrial city, or if AI is the highest level of the industrial city, meaning it's the summit of capitalism and corporate greed coming to effect? Or can we also interpret it as a way that, hey, actually AI can be used to reconnect us with nature, or AI can be used to understand how this bridge can be done. That's also something we discussed in Paris. A screenless city doesn't have to be a technology-less city. And like you could have a smart city that is not a data factory, but that's actually a living organism. And then you go back to what I started with, which is the full circle of it going back to, okay, but what does it mean to be alive? Because again, if it's technology and it responds, maybe that's not the same as being alive, right? So I think I diverted a bit from your answer, but I see you smiling, so we're getting somewhere.
Yeah, no, no, definitely. And actually, let's go there. Maybe now at the intersection of skin-to-skin architecture and screenless cities. So that's also why I was, in a sense, very interested when I read this paper. It's because it resonated a lot. Um, so we when we met at in Paris, like we wanted to explore this idea of removing screens between people and the city, in a sense. And this idea of skin to skin architecture I found was like perfect because with, in a sense, the screen city. So the fact that we interact more and more with urban, all things urban spaces, people through our smartphones. In a sense, we touch the city, but in a very poor way, through the screen. So that's our only way, I would say, of touching the city. And obviously, we are more standing for like multisensory approach, like screenless approach, and as you said, like in a sense, creating new kind of AI that bring us closer to the city. So how do you envision this? How do you envision AI being used not only through our screens and a kind of very poor, and I don't even think we could call it skin to skin
Yeah.
architecture, but for more like really skin to skin architecture?
So I think there are a few things, right? So for me, the skin to skin concept works because we've all been babies and we've all been helped. Helped. Maybe helped as well, but helped. So subconsciously and maybe consciously, we know what it is to be held and to be safe, and we've all had that. Um, and that is it's a biological. It's almost like a response. It's a reflex. I mean, it's a trigger. You can't help it but feel better. It's like when you hit your knee and your leg goes like you can't control it. And I think that is the thing we need to explore because there's the risk of the misinterpretation that skin to skin is about tactility. And I don't think that is what it is, even though I think that cities should probably be more tactile than they are. Because then again, large cities, and I know you live in Paris, which is a beautiful city, but many cities in the world don't, and maybe you don't consider Paris that clean, but many cities in the world are not beautiful, clean objects where you would love to just spread yourself all over and touch everything and be part of the city, right? So, and I don't even mean like large metropolitan areas, but even like the cities are not human scale. They're not, it's hard for us to act and interact with. So I think there you're onto one thing. It's like, what does it mean for us to act and interact? And I don't really mean even I said human scale and I caught myself in that trap. So I don't mean the Jean Hill philosophy that you shouldn't be higher than 4 stories because that's the perspective that you can see as a human and controls the wind and stuff. And um, but there is something about the relatability. Like if you go to skyscrapers or if you go to whatever, like we don't, after a certain level, the brain just ignores it. It's there, meaning it's not valuable to us. And it might even be destructive to us, right? Your question was how can AI be used for that external to the screen, right? And then I guess the first step would be the smart city approach, like understanding humans and understanding data flows of people. But I think eventually it should become even smarter for AI to help us understand what we are there to do and what we want to do. Because the only way we as humans are going to change the relationship with us as a city or us in the city is if the city starts bringing more value to us. I really believe, and it's not just about the dopamine cycle we need to hack, but it's about successful task completion, right? Why am I there? What am I doing? How is this impacting me? How is this impacting my quality of life or my happiness or my health or my whatever? And then maybe you should start there. What are the core value drivers of a city in a post-industrial era? So let's take away job and finance and all the stuff that we cannot control, because those forces are bigger than ours, right? If you need to commute in the city and you take the metro, I mean, I doubt it's going to be a regenerative, healthy, pleasant experience by fact, because it's not designed that way, because no one has an interest in making it that way, because you're there to go to work. You're not there to hang out as a spa day, right? So I think that is one step that you need to. What are the core elements that a city should provide? And then start working on those. Maybe it's health, maybe it's safety, maybe it's growth, maybe it's, I don't know. And that is how I would see. And then you can use AI for those. I don't even think we should put it in the smart city layer, because then you just get the, I don't know, sensorphilia. Maybe is that a new word we can coin.
What you're sharing actually resonates a lot, because we recently launched a global observatory of urban AI narratives with the goal of understanding how urban AI should be used. And usually, so we're doing like workshop all around the world, in-person workshop with different communities, different people. And usually the first question we ask during those workshops is actually not at all tech oriented or AI oriented, but it's for you, what is a city made for? Like, what is
Exactly.
the mission? And that's super interesting to see different visions depending on so communities. And then, like much later, we talk about AI. But maybe to go back to skin architecture itself. Let's say, I don't know, I'm a city and I want to implement this vision. What would be your first recommendation? Is it like in terms of design? Is it economic? Like, how can we bring it to life in a sense, this skin to skin architecture?
I think you need to go back to understanding the biological, the physiological, and the psychological layers of design. So as a city, what do you want to do? Let's say you want to build a new park, or you want to build a new promenade, or you want to build a new shopping center, or whatever it may be. What are the goals? And I really I don't want the summary of this call to just be like capitalism bad, but if there's a money driver, I mean, that's gonna be a core ingredient, right? So I think you really need to understand, what do I want to give to my people? And maybe even make an ambitious goal saying, I want everyone that goes through that park to lower their heart rate from 78 to 76. Why? Because that's a tangible stress reduction that I can measure, that has nothing to do with, do I find this pretty, or do I find this helpful, or do I find this healthy? And it's really like, because I think the skin to skin architecture philosophy is about the interior, like very close to the heart. How do I relate with this? Yes or no? And that's the sensitivity and that is, I think, the the lens you should look at, because otherwise it just becomes a design exercise or economic exercise, or um and that is where I would start. Um, and I mean, this is very hard, right? Because there's no municipality that's going to have a meeting about what's the average heart rate of people in the metro. They probably, well, yeah, go.
So in a sense, it's a kind of additional expertise that need to bring to be there around the table when a park or when an urban project is designed. Like, we need to have this voice on skin to skin architecture, which is related to neuro architecture, which is related to which fields in a sense.
No, so that's related. So I think it's everything I've been speaking about, right? So it goes from biourbanism to neuroarchitecture, and it's like it's the human layer of design. Is that a separate expertise that needs to be hired to sit at the table? I mean, if you're watching this and you want to, please feel free to reach out to me. I can help, Hubert can help, Marco can help, Damiano can help. I mean, this is part of what we're doing at BAITT as well. So I think it is more the demand or the ask for the human layer in design. And then again, if it's architectural design, interior design, urban design, digital design is all fine. Is that a separate expertise? I would almost say sadly, yes, because decision making often doesn't have medical, biological, psychological, physiological measurements into account or metrics that they track. Also because it's very hard to track, I get that. But it's just we have the liberty and the technological ability to design anything we want. So why wouldn't we design something that's good for us? I mean, it seems like a very stupid question, but if you look around you, there are many questions I have. So
I might have a question on this, and then maybe
yeah,
after this, a more philosophical question. But just before, again, an operational question. I'm asking also those operational questions because usually I know that in our viewers, in people looking the episodes, we have local governments, we have urban
yeah,
planners, and I really
yeah,
want, in a sense, that if they say, okay, I like it, what's the next step? So here makes sense. Maybe reach out basically to you, to so BAITT, like basically to bring into the room this expertise.
yeah.
And I have another question, which is related to what you shared. What do you argue to, let's say, people that would say, in terms of budget reduction, we do not have, the money to this. We need to focus, let's say, on elementary elements. I'm on purpose, taking this
I
argument.
know.
But what could you say to this?
So since the beginning of my PhD, when I started to bring neuroscience and architecture together, I've always had this question, and I've always had this concern because it's almost like it's a nice to have, right? It's a yeah. Wouldn't it be wonderful if my building was regenerative rather than sustainable? But right now it's energy label G, so getting to D is fine. We don't need A plus plus plus, right? That's like that's the kind of concern. For me, it's very simple. It's impossible to design something that doesn't impact us. So you're saying that you're okay with making decisions in the government, in the municipality, as an architect, as an urban designer, as an urban planner. You're okay with making decisions without knowing what the real impact will be, which is like cooking a meal blindfolded. I don't know the ingredients. I don't know when it's cooked. I just know that it should be kind of good and I pray for the best. That is not how I operate. That's not how I live my life. That's not how I see the world. So it's impossible to design something that doesn't impact us. And if it's anything, this cork mat will impact me. My phone from a slightly non-branded popular brand impacts me. The experience of my Chrome browser impacts me. Everything that has been designed impacts me on how I act with it, how I think about it, how I feel with it, how my heart rate's going, how if my pupil dilation is going up or not. Everything impacts me. Because then at the end of the day, wouldn't it be just, oh, but I don't know, I can just follow the standards, or I can like, isn't BIM enough? Or like there are lots of things that are like, and for me, it's like, I don't know. We should probably start in education, as in any AutoCAD type or any CAD type software needs to have the behavioral prediction layer there, which is something actually now with AI will probably become a lot easier to do because we need to understand, and that's about people mapping. That's about how in an urban square you have a magnet and you put it there and you can plot how the people are going to go because we're rats in a maze and potato potato, it's all the same. But it's like this thorough behavioral understanding of one, us being very simple and stupid biological machines. Like I put coffee in, heart rate goes up, surprise, surprise. Or us being very complex psychological, mental, potentially even spiritual beings that have feelings and opinions and stuff that goes beyond cells per se, so beyond the molecular layer. And how can I plug into both, right? And that's, I think, why the biourban acupuncture layer is interesting. Because if you believe in acupuncture, meridians and energy flows, yes or no, again, it's kind of irrelevant. It's about understanding, can I make an impact in the city fabric, in my building, in my house, in my life, that has a greater ripple effect and impact that goes beyond that, right? And I think that's how you should start. So is it complex? For sure. Will we solve the world? No. Is applying skin to skin architecture going to guarantee that you have a better design for your city, for your mall, for your park, for your parking garage? I don't know. Should you take into account that there is this drastically complex human layer involved? 100%.
So in any case, there will be an impact in a sense. The question is, can we control it or at least make it positive? Like to have a more intentional approach using, for example, skin-to-skin architecture, not only, but the skill and concept you shared. I might have another question regarding
Sure.
an opposite technological trend. Uh, because so with this idea of skin-to-skin architecture, you share it, there is this idea of having a tactile approach
Yeah.
to cities and even to technology. And I think it also resonates a lot with papers from Dan Hill, on the soft
Yeah.
city or research on spatial AI. And this is definitely an exciting and I believe human-centric direction. And this is also the one we support when we talk about screenless cities. But you have another direction where technology do not bring us closer to each other. Like we see that screens are creating a kind of loneliness epidemic, that we are more and more staying at home because it's more convenient, to watch Netflix basically or to buy everything
Mm-hmm.
remotely. And actually, even some organizations, they believe that the future will be home-based, that we will do everything from our home and that we'll just have to use augmented reality to connect with
Mm-hmm.
each other, to have fun. And you also have in science fiction movie is
Mm-hmm.
going into this direction. So, what's your view on this future that is being built already in a sense?
Um, what is my view? It is that it's very exciting, and that if the main driver is capitalism, it will most likely go wrong. So I think it's very difficult to say it's good or bad or whatever. What I think is problematic is that companies and probably governments too, they kind of have a monopoly over the decisions that we can make. Because I mean, there are only so many smartphones you can buy. There are only so many headsets I can buy, and half of these headsets are owned by the same company, anyways. Or even if you go one layer higher, everyone that uses an AI chip probably stems from ASML at some point in the chain, right? So even there's a higher orchestration of companies that goes behind. That is a concern because it means we don't have true freedom in the decisions that we do because we can only choose what we're offered. Now, that might be our fault because we support the ones that got us to where we are, meaning is the next logical evolution of what we started. And the second piece is like, I I am not that cynical and dystopian. So I'm quite the tech advocate, and tech can be used for good, and we should like it's a natural path of our evolution. Um, I think again, as I said, economy, greed, politics, whatever, are the drivers for the majority of the decisions there. Excuse me. And many people, being the people, forget that one of the core attributes of being human is laziness. So we are very comfortable doing a task with less effort. We are very comfortable doing something once instead of twice. Farming, when you farm for yourself on your offstead and you have your own goats and stuff, it's almost a full-time job. It's like you need to do a lot of work. We are actually very comfortable going to the supermarket and picking the courgette and the pepper and the whatever, because then I don't have to, right? So laziness is a core foundational principle to how our businesses have been built around us. So I would almost say that if the dystopian future of the Meta headset, where I never need to commute to an office anymore because I can work remotely, is a bad thing, that is entirely our fault. Because we were the driver for every product decision or technological advancement that these companies did that got us to this place. And I think, again, skin-to-skin architecture has the foundation in being aware of the fact that what it truly means to be human, right? What you're talking about right now, it's the same. This technological dystopian 1984 on steroids view of the world is just the logical evolution of laziness and capitalistic evolution. You're frowning, so I'm not sure if you're confused or.
No, I was because my following question is how do we counter this then? You know, is it by the design? Because usually a
Now
way of
that's a very hard question, right? How do we counter being lazy? How do we counter the thing that we naturally bring to the table? Because I mean that is the core of what is the problem, right? So I think option one, you need to admit to the fact that it's going to happen anyways. So let's make it as good as possible. Option two, and because in pairs as well, we discussed that a lot of this is being controlled through policies, right? Because the policy is the driver that can protect us to then that no design decisions can be made that will clash with us eventually, right? And I think that's an important consideration. But then nobody cares about policies. Like it's not the most entertaining topic to evolve or to talk about. And like policies in AI, I mean, it's like it's not good luck if that's the route you want to take. So I think it's more about okay, so a building can be a building, right? A building can be a sustainable building, and a building can be a regenerative building. They're all buildings. They probably consume the same amount of natural materials, like beams, bricks, I don't know, tiles, whatever that we make houses of. We can 3D print them from soil for all I care. So if we need to make something anyways, why don't we do it in a healthy way? So for example, if you say that we're going to move to a VR headset and whatever, why don't we make sure that from a design point of view, we always measure and mimic the pupil dilation of the user, not to feed them the next ad at the most susceptible moment of them clicking purchase, but when they actually, hey, you've had enough right now and you should take a 10-minute break and stretch your spinal cords because we need to stretch the vertebrae a bit because we can notice in the headset that you're slouching, right? So why don't we? But that needs to have a value. Users, people are only going to change if they gain something. Now, maybe I'm not cynic and dystopian, but I guess I'm a pessimist on humans. We are lazy and we are kind of greedy. We're very self-centered. We're only going to move. We're only going to change our opinion if there's a gain for us. So as a designer of a service, of a tool, of a website, of a VR world, of an AR world, you always need to think, what does the user want? How can I ensure that I have successful task completion, whatever that task was? Maybe the user didn't even know what the task originally was. And then in marketing terms, we can call that an impulse buy, right? And maybe in design terms, it's serendipity. And these are, I guess, the design principles that we as a society should almost ask for, and we need to hold the vendors accountable for. But I mean, I have zero control of what Apple does, right? and how they bring out the next version of whatever. So I
So
think, yeah,
yeah, so could be eventually through policy, eventually through design also maybe. So there is when we talk about AI, you have more and more work and research on frictional AI. So basically, how
yeah.
you make AI that make you interact, that make you make some efforts. So okay, there are some ways of doing it from what you're sharing. But it's not easy. It needs to be done in a very intentional, strategic, planned way, um, especially when we talk about skin-to-skin architecture.
So yes, the short answer is yes.
Okay.
The the long answer is a bit more complex. I think there needs to be a goal in mind, and there needs to be a buy-in from the user that I get something in return. Um,
I'm just
yeah,
no, no. I wanted because we got actually a reaction in the chat from Chris
I see.
Johnston. Maybe you were also reading it,
Yeah.
uh, and quite very interestingly, he's saying, "Is it like back to maybe our previous discussion? Like, is it really laziness, or have we made modern life so complicated and overwhelming that we force individuals to opt for the easiest option because we are too overwhelmed to do more?" Or think through the consequences.
Maybe. So I think I I like to say that we're lazy because it helps often to get the conversation going somewhere, and it helps us think about if we actually are. Everyone is lazy to some extent because everything in the world drives through optimization. And I think the true definition of laziness is that you believe there's a better way to do something. And I think evolution in nature can be considered a version of laziness because it didn't want to do the same thing twice. Now, if you take that definition of laziness, I'm happy to stand by it that I think it's that. But have we made this world too complex? 100%. Are we opting out because it's easy? 100%. But at the same time, we haven't designed our life around everyone being self-sustainable, for example. And we're super dependent. We're super dependent on supermarkets, on energy, on electricity, on the whole services industry around us, the whole urban industry around us. Like none of us, I mean, I have a lot of colleagues in Portugal. Recently, you had the power outage in Portugal and Spain. And it's like the whole country just stops when just one ingredient of our day-to-day life fails, everything ends. Actually, that was a funny moment. People started to reconnect with their neighbors, went out in squares, and you have this almost skin-to-skin layer, which is the hidden layer that we often don't see because we're so busy and distracted with all this other fluff. So maybe it's a part of the overwhelmingness. But I would say it's that as well. I wouldn't say that it's not lazy. I think as a species we are lazy, which is not a bad thing. It's an evolutionary trait. It's fine.
Yeah, this what you're sharing actually is a tendency to find the fastest way to basically,
Exactly.
yeah, find a solution.
Water does the same. Like
Yeah,
water finds the easy, like it's the same principle from a nature point of view, right?
and so maybe completely agree. What I also like, in a sense, with Chris Johnson comment is a maybe systemic perspective. Like very complementary. This idea that sometimes agents can be as courageous and as willingness as they want. If they are in the wrong system, well, at the end of the day, you're still empty, and indeed, you're watching the TV because your brain is over consumed. Not for the majority, no, for the majority, not for all, but for the majority. Well, Menno, that was really
One
a fascinating.
thing
Yeah, sure, sure,
One
sure.
thing, sorry, I know you want to wrap up, but just one thing around that. I think The other part which makes us humans is that we find patterns, that we spot patterns, and that we are very habitual in what we do. So we build patterns very easily because, again, it's an energy consumption way of doing things. If I do the same thing, I can do it without burning as much energy as I have to do. So the brain is always looking for this mimicking symmetry optimization. And we see this in design. We see this in designing your life. We see this in a lot of things. Um, so maybe, again, laziness and optimization, they are two sides of the same coin, which is then a cost reduction strategy that we have implemented. But that's just one thing. I mean, it takes 21 days to build a habit, right? And then it's very hard to break this habit because the body, the mind, the internal system has adjusted to this, which is the other thing. Maybe there's one thing we can think about, Hubert, which is, could you build a 21-day program that allows people to reconnect with the city or build a different relationship with the city, with the idea that it takes 3 weeks, about 21 days to build a habit or break one? Maybe that's something we can think about.
Yeah, yeah, maybe that could be actually for another conversation or collaboration, but that's super interesting. Before we stop the conversation, Mino, do you have projects like related to the skin to skin concept you want to share, or maybe publications? What should we follow if we want to keep an eye on your work on this field?
Yeah, sure. So you can follow me or on LinkedIn or go to BAITT, or I mean, I had the skin to skin architecture website open as well, so skin to skin architecture.com. Myself and Marco are still working in Ukraine, as I said, and I think there will be stuff coming out soon. And I think if anyone has interest in that or is interested in the code and the underlying foundational principles, I think that would also be interesting to work on. And otherwise, yeah, follow BAITT. We are on social now, which I just started, and I need to find more time to do this, but I'm sure you know how that works. And online, I try to publish regularly myself, Damiano, and others. But the easiest way for now is to reach me or to reach BAITT, and then
Okay.
we can
We,
see.
we we will put the links in the description of the YouTube video. I also really encourage you to have a look and actually to read the paper. It's also a beautiful paper. We didn't discuss it, but you really have beautiful parts, the last parts on how skin to skin architecture help us to heal and help
Yeah,
at the collective level, at the urban level to like go back from trauma or go back from destruction. Like it's we really have beautiful parts. So I really encourage you to have a look to this paper, and we will also put it in the description of the video.
I
Thanks a
appreciate that.
Thanks a lot, really, Menno, for the fascinating conversation. We move a bit away from the initial topic, but that's the beauty also of human to human interactions. And so we will have a summary of this conversation published on our blog next week. And next week, next Urban AI conversation will be dedicated actually to related topic, urban AI and urban heritage. And so if you want to join the recording, you are more than welcome. Thanks, Menno.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Take
Bye
care.
bye.